It's 7:07. It's O'Connor and Company plowing through this morning. Craziness going on in the world and certainly here in Washington, D.C., but that's why you need us in your corner. Coming up at 7:35, Reagan Reese, White House reporter for the Daily Caller. Daily Caller, see, they don't print lies, so they're allowed to go to the White House press briefings. Unlike the Associated Press, we're going to get to that. Associated Press caught red-handed with a lie in an article about DOJ and the FAA. And now they've changed the article without telling their readers they changed the article. I'm livid about this. We'll get to it coming up in a bit. Joining us right now, though, well, first, Julie Gunlock's here.
Good morning.
Good morning. Wonderful to have Julie keeping me in line. And keeping all of us in line is the Heritage Foundation. As you know, Brent Sadler, a senior research fellow over there at that august institution, joins us now. Good morning, Mr. Sadler.
Good morning.
I suspect you may have been burning the midnight oil trying to stay on top of the goings-on in the Middle East, as Secretary of State Marco Rubio is now sitting with his counterpart from Russia in a conference room in the Palace of Saudi Arabia. This hopefully is going to lead to a peace between Ukraine and Russia. First off, there's been some criticism that Ukraine is not at this table. Does that concern you, that this peace, the beginning stages of this peace, are being negotiated between the U.S. and Russia directly after the U.S. has met with Ukrainian officials? Is this shuttle diplomacy? What's at work here?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And so first off, I'm not concerned. I think a lot of this is being kind of taken out of context. President Trump did talk with Zelensky last week. So the Ukrainians are they're being informed and kept engaged as things move forward. But this is the early stages, perhaps the first movement of several that even before you get the principal Ukrainian leadership and Russian leadership to sit at the table to begin a negotiation. So this is not even the negotiation. It's setting the contours for what is probably going to transpire over the next few weeks or months before we get to that. The other thing about this is there's more at play than just ending the war in Ukraine in Riyadh right now. Of course, Saudi Arabia, perhaps coming into the Abraham Accords, wider peace in the Middle East, but then having Mr. Wyckoff there, who was instrumental in getting Americans out of Moscow and out of Hamas's captivity. There's still Americans that are being held in Moscow. So this is also something I think to consider.
So in other words, this isn't necessarily a Ukraine-Russia war summit as much as it's the U.S. re-engaging with Russia over multiple issues, including the conflict in Ukraine.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I'm curious, is that the reason, you might have just answered my question before I asked it, but is that the reason we're not seeing Keith Kellogg? He's the sort of Ukraine-Russia envoy. Is that the reason he's not there? I'm kind of curious why he isn't present at this sort of summit.
Now, that's a great observation. Now, General Kellogg is heading up the effort to find and to hammer at an end to the fighting. Is it the ceasefire or is it a more enduring kind of end of this war that's acceptable to U.S., to President Trump, but for American national interests first and foremost? So that's why I say there's more at play here. This is the first movement in several as we begin to set the contours. And so what General Kellogg is doing is something to continue to watch. Where is he right now? Who is he engaging? But what we have to be very careful, and his team, I think, would probably be the ones looking at this, is to ensure whatever territorial line is agreed to, that Russia doesn't have hard points, that they could easily renew the war at their leisure in the future, but that Ukraine has tactical advantages on the battlefield. Bottom line is the details matter, and where that line actually goes through, this is the stuff that General Kellogg, an Army guy, but also his team is probably going to be in the lead for. So they don't need to be in Riyadh right now.
Okay.
Brent Sadler, Senior Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. We're talking about this Russia-America summit going on in Saudi Arabia. Back to the Ukraine question, though, which is certainly going to be a major topic of conversation. Based on what you heard from Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth last week and Vice President J.D. Vance, what do you think they're moving toward here with regard to some sort of peace deal, ceasefire, what they kept saying as enduring peace?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the key thing. So a few of the key things that I'll be watching on this is, one, where's that territorial line? Putin annexed 5 states or oblast Two of those, arguably, a lot of that is held by Russia, need to go completely back to the Ukrainians. But where that line matters. The other thing is it's finally we're seeing the Europeans coming together to try to fashion in a very real way a response to Putin. They gradually increase the defense spending, but the meeting in Paris just yesterday, I look at that as favorable. It's like, all right, if Putin is a real threat, what are you willing to do about it? And so we'll see what comes out and if there's anything meaningful. But I think the bottom line is, what's the effect of all this disconnected action on the surface? And that is to signal to Moscow that there's going to be a sustained cost if you do not come to the table and negotiate a lasting peace.
And what do you say to some critics who say, listen, the only reason that we're here at this point is because Trump has indicated that he's not going to continue to support the Ukraine war effort, though that's not exactly true, but that seems to be how this is characterized. In other words, Ukraine's only moving forward on this because there's not going to be any more military support for their effort. By the way, even if that's true, is that a bad thing necessarily?
Yeah, I think Putin and certainly the Kremlin's smart enough not to follow politically motivated headlines in the news media that's aiming for a political attack on President Trump. The Russians and Putin specifically know that President Trump has and is willing to apply the military hammer in order to get a message delivered positively into Moscow. He's done this multiple times, and he probably will do it again. So simply because President Trump says, I want to end this war, doesn't mean that the American public and the American presidency and the administration is going to give a blank check to Moscow. And I think Putin understands that, and that's why Putin, simply like the day after the election in November, started to try to circle in and try to open up doors of communication or channels of communication with President Trump's incoming team.
Are we going to see continued sort of military strikes? Are we going to see more continued engagement, or is this going to slow down? I mean, we have seen continued strikes, so I'm just wondering when are we going to see a pause on that as these talks continue?
Yeah, this was a mistake of the last administration, and even when they were in the Obama administration, the same kind of out-of-hand fear of escalation when you're involved in an actual armed conflict in Ukraine. So the same message that I've been sending for several weeks now is that while there's these negotiations and we're just in the initial kind of sensing phase and setting the contours of it, things are going to get a lot more violent before they get peaceful. And what I mean by that is both sides are going to try to maximize their leverage going into the official or the formal negotiations, which could be weeks or months from now. The other thing is, most importantly, is both the Russians and the Ukrainians still have a lot of fight left in them. The Ukrainians they are mass-producing drones that can go in long range. They have their own long-range cruise missiles now that they don't. I mean, again, I've been watching this. It's notable that since President Trump was reelected, the Ukrainians have been increasing their attacks longer and further into Russia. So there's a capacity there to cause a lot more hurt further into Russia. And the Russians have not relented. They've been continuing large-scale offensives across all the borders, at least the southern and the southeastern ones, along the Donbass most notably, to try to take more and more nibbles out of Ukrainian territory. So before the seasons change, you get this mud season in June, July, where military operations kind of grind to a halt. Things are going to get, I'd say between now and then, there's a high probability that things will get more violent before they get better. Okay. Doesn't mean the negotiations stop.
Okay.
Mud season. I love that they have a mud season. That's great.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Thank you, Brent Sadler, Heritage Foundation. Always good to talk with you, sir. Thanks for getting us well read on this and downloaded. We feel smarter now as this news story develops today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day.
It's 7:16. Let's get straight to Jamie Whitten in the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center.
WMAL, making sense of the news.
Well, we've come a long way from "do not come." Do not come. You remember that was the message from Kamala Harris, our old border czar. Don't, or just don't. Yeah, that was the message to Iran. That worked.
Oh, right. Sorry. Yeah.
leading right up to the October 7th massacre funded by Iran with American dollars. Don't. What's your message to Iran? Don't.
Yeah.
They did. Now what? Don't do it again.
God.
And then, of course, Kamala Harris, she, as our borders are, made a trip down to Guatemala. And during a press conference, she just said, do not come, do not come. And, of course, then millions flooded our border because we saw that she was weak and did not mean what she said.
Can tell she's not a mother. Go on. Sorry.
We've got a much stronger message coming now from our Department of Homeland Security. What you're about to hear is an ad that's been produced by the department specifically to play in foreign nations. I assume there's going to be language interpretation into Spanish and other nationalities. But here is Kristi Noem, the Secretary of Homeland Security.
I'm Kristi Noem, the United States Secretary of Homeland Security. Thank you, President Donald J. Trump, for securing our border and putting America first. Let me deliver a message from President Trump to the world. If you are considering entering America illegally, don't even think about it. Let me be clear. If you come to our country and you break our laws, we will hunt you down. Criminals are not welcome in the United States. For too long, weak leadership has left our borders wide open, flooding our communities with drugs, human trafficking, and violent criminals. Well, those days are over. Under President Trump, we are defending American families and restoring their safety. If you try to enter illegally, you will be caught, you will be removed, and you will never return. Follow the law, and you'll find opportunity. If you break it, you'll find consequences. Strong borders mean a stronger America. President Trump is making America safe again.
There you go. And that's going to be a multi-million-dollar ad campaign, not just here in this country, but worldwide. What do you think?
I think it's great. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. A few more words than don't. Don't do it.
I did a little bit better than don't come.
Yeah.
Do not come. I like don't even think about it, in fact. And it also will add to what I believe will be a move of what Mitt Romney used to call self-deportation. When you start enforcing the law here, you start hunting people down and deporting them. When you start a crackdown, and this is what's really necessary, Department of Homeland Security, and I know they know this and I know they're planning it, but you got to start cracking down on employers who are knowingly hiring people illegally. Make a move for real ID checks across the board, real-time computerized ID check. And if you get here and you don't get a job and you don't get benefits and you have to be on the run from the law, guess what? You're not going to come here. And if you're here illegally, you're going to leave. And that's what Mitt Romney used to call self-deportation as soon as you start enforcing the law. Where is Mitt Romney? He should be applauding this now. So this is a good thing.
Running a country, securing our borders, making sure Americans are safe. It's hard work. It's hard. It's difficult. Yeah. And the Biden administration was asleep they were totally asleep at the wheel. I mean, legitimately, he was napping. Everybody was napping during the Biden administration. It's hard, and these things are difficult. But I think this is the kind of message that will deter a lot of people from coming, and deterrence is really important.
Yeah. By the way, the Trump administration is also reorganizing the Department of Homeland Security. They've determined that it's a little too top-heavy. There's way too many senior leaders who are not effective in their jobs. And they've announced that they're preparing to fire hundreds of high-level Department of Homeland Security employees. This is what they're characterizing as part of a move to rid the country's third-largest agency of people deemed to be misaligned with the administration's goals, according to three sources familiar with the matter. That's reported by NBC News. The firings will come on top of hundreds of more general cuts that begin across DHS on Friday night, targeting Federal Emergency Management Agency, U.S. Citizens and Immigration Services, and Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency.
Remember, I think people need to remember this. The Department of Homeland Security was originally designed to sort of cut down on bureaucracy. That was the idea, that we were going to have this agency that sort of collected a bunch of stuff, disseminated a bunch of stuff, and it was all going to cut down on this bureaucratic fighting. It hasn't worked out that way. What the DHS is now is an added layer. I feel bad for people who might be caught up in these cuts. But again, this was not the original sort of design of DHS, which again was to sort of bring everyone together and make sure they're all communicating. It has become another layer that agencies need to go through in order to get that information out to local law enforcement, for instance. So it's time that these. It was only created in 2022. 2002.
2003,
and,
I think.
Yeah, 2003. And the idea that it's now the third largest agency, I don't think that was the original design.
Right. Let's get it running more efficient and back to the goals of actually protecting the country, because obviously way too much of DHS has been put in place to just process people to come into this country illegally rather than actually enforce our laws. Keep us safer. It's 7:24.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
7:37 now on Oak. I should really get a job speaking for a living, Julie. Let's try that again, shall we? It's 7:37 on O'Connor and Company with Julie Gunlock. I'm Larry O'Connor, and joining us now, Reagan Reese, pride of Hillsdale College, now a White House reporter for the Daily Caller. Reagan, the question everyone wants to know, will the Daily Caller get the Associated Press's chair in the front row at this point?
Ooh, that's a great question, and maybe something I might spend my morning looking into. I would love to see. I would love to see the White House pool, honestly, completely blown up, and it would be great if it was 10 new reporters that got to go in every single day and got to travel with the president. I would love if it was different for everybody every day.
On other shows, Reagan, this would be considered inside baseball. But our show, we're in D.C. This is WMAL. We are inside baseball. So let's spend a little time on this, because there's so much misinformation that this is a threat to press freedom, that the White House is keeping the Associated Press out of the White House and out of briefings because they won't call the Gulf of America Gulf of America. Will you please explain to everybody exactly what the White House is doing here and what the AP is being excluded from? Because it's not exactly how we're hearing it.
Yes. So the president signed an executive order designating the Gulf of Mexico to be called the Gulf of America, be renamed the Gulf of America in the United States. The AP has said that it is still going to call the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of Mexico, because they have a worldwide audience and they don't want to confuse people outside of the United States. The White House, which has been very clear.
Which, by the way, is so ridiculous, because everybody has a worldwide audience. They're so arrogant.
Yeah, I know.
It's the internet. Our show has a worldwide audience. You can listen anywhere in the world to what we did. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's just their arrogance and pomposity drives me insane.
No, I would prefer if you interjected with that commentary, because that's something, as a journalist, I probably wouldn't say. Then they have kind of refused, and the White House, which has been very clear in saying, hey, if you are spreading misinformation or fake news, you're going to be punished by this administration. And so the AP, which gets the privilege of being on the White House press pool every single day, and that is something that the Daily Caller gets to do just once a month, has now been barred from going into the Oval Office and Air Force One, which the White House says those two spaces are privileges, but they still have their White House badges. They still have that first front and row in the center seat of the White House briefing room. They're still allowed on campus. They're still allowed to cover the president and ask him questions, just not in the Oval Office and on Air Force One.
So it's the distinction between the pool, which is a very small group of reporters that AP somehow has inherited a permanent spot in, versus the reporting body writ large. All right, Julie, thank you.
Okay, Reagan, this might be a little gossipy, but we love gossip. So I'm just wondering, what is it like in there? Is there, I guess what I mean is there some sort of collective outrage on behalf of the AP from other reporters? Are people sort of like, finally they're getting their comeuppance? What's kind of the mood in the room?
Honestly, it's a bit of a mixed bag. I think that you have a camp of reporters who are have been so fed up and mistreated during the Biden administration that they love seeing this coming for the AP. I think that then you have on the complete opposite side of the spectrum, the mainstream media, who is like thrilled that this is their opportunity to keep calling Trump fascist and that they can use this to their power. I think there's a bit of a middle camp too that isn't super thrilled about how this is all playing out, that it's more annoying and distracting, that perhaps the terminology, a fight over terminology and, you know, between the government and outlet can be a bit frustrating and distracting. And so I think it's a mixed bag.
Yeah.
But we haven't had a briefing really since this was started to escalate. So I'm curious to see how it's going to go.
Do you think, you know, I always think back to Sean Spicer and some of the early days of the first Trump administration, and how rude they were, how aggressively rude they were in that room to whoever was the press secretary. Are you noticing, I feel like I am, that they're a little bit more polite? They're not quite so.
They're definitely more polite. However, when Caroline stops taking questions, or, you know, when she's trying to move on, there's so much shouting and interjecting, and even with the president standing up and lunging at the president, trying to get a question. I've never saw this under Biden. It was like, Karine Jean-Pierre's done taking questions. Thank you so much, Madam Press Secretary. And everybody moves on.
Yes.
And now it's like a madhouse.
Interesting.
Reagan, it seems to be everyone's saying, when will Trump stop or slow down 4 weeks into his presidency, which, by the way, today is the anniversary of the first full day of his presidency. Yesterday was the anniversary of his inauguration. And it looks like this is the week. He's in Mar-a-Lago. Is he in Mar-a-Lago the entire week? And it looks like you're getting a bit of a break.
I love this question. So the way that the White House is working, under Biden, we got weekly guidance. We knew what was coming for the week ahead. Under Trump, I'm finding out either, you know, at midnight or early in the morning what the president is going to be doing each day. There's no notice ahead of time. And I said to a White House official this week, you know, hey, I wish we got a weekly guidance. And the official said to me, I wish I got a weekly guidance. So it kind of just sounds like the president each day is doing what he wants. And so I have no idea if he's slowing down. But I've kind of heard some rumblings that the week is going to end on a high note.
All right. Oh, all right. We'll take a look at that. Reagan Reese, always good to talk with you. I feel like almost a fatherly mentor position for you because of our connection with Hillsdale, and you're with Daily Caller, and I used to be with Breitbart in the early days. Can I just say, you know, you follow in some footsteps. Caitlin Collins used to have a job similar to yours at Daily Caller. Reagan, don't be Caitlin Collins, okay?
Yeah.
Can I just...
I have strong beliefs and will continue in the right-wing media.
Thank you. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah,
I put you
it.
in an awkward position, Reagan, and I apologize for that. It's not fair.
You're okay.
But I think we understand each other. Thank you, Reagan.
Thank you, Reagan.
Her name's
thank
Reagan,
you,
after
thank
all. It's
Yeah, exactly.
7:44.
Later this morning on the Chris Plante Show, MSNBC wants to do away with President's Day forever. Huh, I wonder why. 9 a.m. on WMAL.
This does remind me of the federal government version of the Afghanistan drawdown. The way we went about doing it was horrible. We could have done it in a better way.
This is what amounts to political analysis on MSNBC. Her name is Elise Jordan, and that was her analysis of Doge there. It's like Afghanistan, you know. Everyone agreed we had to do it, but we could have done it a different way. Trace Gallagher picked this out last night on Fox, and he had a sort of an appropriate response.
Yeah, she forgets that people died, Americans died, that our allies that worked with us on the ground died, are still struggling today. It's a bad analogy.
It's a bad analogy, to say the least. By the way, our friend Link Lauren, social media commentator, had a pretty good reaction as well.
Much like Margaret Brennan, I think she fell down the stupid tree and hit every single branch, because the Afghanistan withdrawal is a stain on our country, and making that akin to Doge is absolutely absurd. I don't know how she still has a job.
Larry, Mary, what's interesting also was that this is the only time I've heard a Democrat talk about Afghanistan and the withdrawal.
As if it was anything but a stunning success.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. I will say she did hit every branch in the stupid tree on the way down. However, to hear a Democrat even mention the catastrophe of the sloppy and, just deadly withdrawal from Afghanistan, well, at least there's that. At least they're actually talking about it.
Well, I'm glad, frankly, that Elise Jordan, MSNBC political analyst, raised the Afghanistan issue because, according to Christina Wong's exclusive reporting at Breitbart News, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth said in an interview that he has tapped investigators for the Afghanistan withdrawal to investigate exactly what happened at the Pentagon, who gave what advice, who said what, who tried to overrule, who tried to speak up. He said accountability will be coming over Afghanistan. So, Elise, thanks for bringing that up. I think we're going to get some answers finally. 7:53.